Welcome to the Full and Abundant Life program tonight. And I want to apologize because we were having some technical difficulties and we were not able to bring the program for the past last 2 weeks. And somehow I think we may have gotten this whole thing fixed. And so we're happy to be here tonight. We're just waiting on the WFM link tonight to begin our session tonight. So hopefully everything will go well, and we certainly are happy to be back up and running tonight. So let me just try to get all of this squared away, hopefully, and we will be up and ready to go. So hopefully, let me get this. Let me see, where am I here? Okay, maybe I should go here. Okay. Okay, so we are up. Okay, here we go. Here we have
Davis and comes your way each and every Wednesday from 9 until 10. To be a part of this evening's program, the number to call 457-9997. That's 457-9997. Just to remind you as well that you can send us a WhatsApp message or place a WhatsApp card to be a part of this evening's Full and Abundant Life radio program here on WFM. And without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome.
And it's certainly a privilege to be here tonight. And obviously, we're up on our two other on the Facebook page and the WFM. So somehow we've gotten this fixed. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, I have a smile on my face because I turned the camera towards me. Yeah. Then when I look back, I noticed that the camera swung by itself and I was looking at your chair.
so we were back in business, actually. So I'm really grateful for that. And I truly apologize to some of our viewers who view it via the Facebook page. But hopefully, but so we'll just have to review a little bit kind of what we have missed. And because I think the people in St. Vincent did get some of it via the radio, of course, but those who by the Facebook page weren't able to do that. And so let me begin. Again, I just want to remind us what we've been looking at for the past 4 weeks or so is looking at the family, and in particular as it relates to child development. And we were looking at it from an inside view instead of from an external view. And so tonight, I just want to spend just a little bit to talk a little bit about substance abuse as it impacts the family, and certainly will have an impact on the home environment and the negative impact that it will have on the family itself. So Terry Kula made a statement that I think I want to start off with that. And he says that environmental abuse stems from childhood abuse. And then he says the grieving, that hurt, that pain fueled the forward movement of our lives. In other words, the environmental, what we see that is taking place in our environment, that abuse really comes from the smaller unit. And then he went on to say that the pain that we bring, that we carries us, it governs, it controls our relationship, it controls how we feel about ourselves, it controls our choices. And we see a lot of the self-destructive elements that we see in our society today as it relates to substance abuse and as it relates to our young people. And not just our young people, but young adults and even old adults in terms of, the impact of alcohol, the physical deterioration of internal organs, and how it hampers our lives. So all of that do in fact have an impact. So a drug abuse, I think, is symptomatic of our culture. We see it in our family, and it has to do with a lot of the personal issues, I think, that we're facing in our society. I think it's a great cost that we experience in terms of societal cost, in terms of housing, treating, substance abuse individuals. A lot of the treatment facilities that we see here in the United States, here on Long Island, obviously in some of the smaller islands, they may not have all of the resources in order to provide, inpatient treatment just for substance abuse, even outpatient treatment. But nonetheless, it is a tremendous cost. But it also is having a serious impact on children and the raising of children. So the problem, I think, is real, but I think it stems from, and we can go back to some of the issues in terms of, and I know you don't like when I say this, but some of the issues really, it stems, especially substance abuse, and the impact of it stems from poverty, it stems from shame, it stems from isolation, family violence. All of these go together, I think, to increase the likelihood of people using chemicals and other substance as a way of subsidizing, not necessarily subsidizing, but as a substitute for being fully human, and as a substitute for finding peace and happiness. And really, it does the opposite, because chemical dependency doesn't produce what it actually is supposed to do, which is lasting happiness. In other words, it enslaves individuals, and we see the destructiveness of it. And I'm saying to us that chemical dependency, that substance abuse, not only impact the person who is using it, the user, but also the family system itself. And it ultimately impact on children, because a mother who is, is a crack addict and spend her life, going after a crack or heroin or opiates, whatever, or other stimulant opiates that she may be engaged in, certainly impact her ability to be a mother. It impacts the family. And if it's the husband, it certainly, the father, it certainly impacts the home environment as a whole. And so it creates a situation for our children in terms of not providing them a healthy environment for them to be socialized in. And one of the area here is that I find that most religious institutions or groups or churches really don't do as much as they ought to be doing in terms of creating intervention that is specifically designed to target substance abuse, to help people to be able to overcome and to develop a sober lifestyle, that alternative. And I think that the gospel, Christianity, is a holistic approach. It's not just about preparing people for heaven, but I think it also ought to prepare people to enjoy the full and abundant life in the here and now, in terms of creating a healthy home environment, an environment where children can be nurtured, where both parents are going to be available, psychologically available, spiritually available, where parents can work together to create an environment where children can be nurtured and mentored into healthy individuals who can take their rightful place in society. So I believe that substance abuse is certainly an area that we certainly need to pay some attention to, really look at in terms of the impact it's having on our society. So I think chemical dependency is real, and I think it destroys life. And like I want to emphasize, it's not only destructive to the user, but also to the children and to the family that's impacted. Because substance abuse have a way of getting people enmeshed in terms of the behavior, and there has to be an enabling factor, and so it continues. And I think it requires institutions that are going to be who's going to provide support and be able to provide not only counseling support in terms of talk therapy, but be able to provide a holistic approach where people can find a community where healing can begin to take place in a holistic way. And so I think I wanted to mention a little bit of that as we begin to look at the family, look at childhood development, and look at it from a holistic point of view. We are told that we are to go into all the world and make disciples. And I think that notion of making disciples apply not only to in proselyting in terms of the what we say, getting people to join your particular church or your particular group by doing these things, and if they do these things, they become a member. I think discipleship, discipling people, is much more of a holistic approach, helping people to become to experience in a practical way the full and abundant life, where that life become internalized within the individual. And I think this is what the Apostle Paul was talking about when he spoke when he wrote to the church to the Galatian Christians in Galatians chapter 4 and verse 19. He said that I labor, I weary myself out, I work night and day with you until Christ be formed in you. And it was my ultimate goal, my labor was so that Christ be formed in you. And when you look at that, what it really is talking about an internal transformation, where the personality gets transformed, and where all those negative emotions are being transformed into healthy emotions, where your thoughts and your opinions and the belief systems are being transformed into healthy belief systems where people are going to value themselves, where they're going to value others, and then they're going to be able to shape and allow themselves to become more productive, not only to celebrate who they are, but rather to begin to make their meaningful contribution in society itself. And this is where youngsters, they get secular education, they get a sound moral values, spiritual education, then they go on and they get married, they start their own family, and they begin to move on. That's what discipleship is about. So it's not just about getting people to attend Sabbath, or getting people to attend on a Sunday morning, or whatever that religious belief system that you subscribe to. It has to be a holistic approach. And of course, I'm not trying to endorse other religious. I'm just saying that the ultimate goal has to be holistic in terms of getting people to be transformed. And so in this particular case, in Galatians chapter 4 and verse 19, Paul says, I labor until Christ be formed in you. He's talking about the transformation of a person's life, where there used to be hate, there is now love and compassion, where there used to be racial discrimination and biases and malice and all of the negative, ugly, nasty, toxic emotions, that those are being somehow get transformed, where you can now become a healthy individual, where the emotions and the thought patterns are not going to be self-destructive, but it's going to be a celebration of life. And that celebration of life is going to be inclusive, where you're going to be able to value all people, irrespective of their race, irrespective of their financial standing, and you're going to see them as brothers and sisters. Yes, there are going to be differences, And I think we are unique in that we all, no one of us are alike. And so we have to, the Christian community, I think, is a community where we begin to value these differences, because we are given different talents, different gifts, and we bring certain different skill sets to the family. And so because of that, we recognize this diversity, and we recognize that, and therefore we are able to use that to enrich our individual lives and that of our family, but also of the community as well. And so I think that substance abuse is somehow a barrier to that. I think it cripples people. It cripples the adult, the user, but it also have an impact on their ability to parent, their ability as a father, their ability as a mother becomes impacted, and the children are the ones who are experiencing the outcome of all of that. And so, and one of these days we maybe after this we could talk a little bit about mental illness and the impact that mental illness will have on the raising of our children. Because if you have a mother who is paranoid, struggling with some psychotic disorder, whether it be schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, whatever that might be, is certainly going to have an impact on her parenting skills and her ability to be able to be available to that child and be able to nurture that child into a healthy individual, because you have to mirror that, basically. And certainly that mirror can become broken. That mirror can become clouded because of the way that they're thinking, that unhealthy, psychotic way of thinking. And not all of us, I think there are many of us who wouldn't be fit into that psychotic area, but we do have, a toxic way of thinking. Viruses in terms of our thinking have become so infested with toxic belief systems, and that I think can impact. And we see that in our world. We see it in the political world, how divided it is, and some of the ugliness that we see, especially during election year, how people can get downright nasty. And I think all of this, I think, have an impact, because it's the root of all of that nastiness is really coming from the family base, because we are socialized within our family system to begin to discriminate against people, to think a certain way, whether it be extremely liberal or extremely on the other side, extremely conservative and self-righteous on the other side of that. All of that we get from our home system and the way we certainly being socialized, and certainly that get transformed to our children. And certainly that's going to have a tremendous impact. And so let me talk a little bit, because we've missed out a lot of our program. And I want to talk a little bit about the working family, because, it's not only poor families, those who are at the lower level socioeconomically, that are struggling, that are having problems. I think that the working class family are also having tremendous problems. And I think children are also struggling there, because I think, hardworking families, I think, do work hard, but I think there's a lot of pain in those families. And I think because once a family is once financial success becomes the priority, becomes the way to measure how successful a family is, how successful a dad is, how successful a mom is. If it's financial standard, that's what it is. That's the what should I say? The peak. That's where we're going. And once that becomes a problem, then what happens when you don't have the financial resources in order to be able to pay the mortgage and be able to buy the car and be able to do this and be able to do that and go on trips. Eventually you begin to compare yourself with others who have the halves of the world. And then you begin to make judgments about yourself, and you start flirting with the idea that you are not worthy, that you're invaluable, you're not important in society, because you use money as a way of measuring success. And that, I think, gets translated down to our children, because sooner or later, such parents begin to believe that they have made it. They begin to feel, unsure about themselves, their worth. Then they begin to question their wisdom. Maybe I'm not as smart as the other person. Maybe I should have gone on to college, or there's always the maybes. If I had done this I would have happened. But you know what? I didn't do all of that. So I'm in this whole place where I'm now a second-class citizen. Sometimes that sense of internal inferiority aren't something that people have imposed on us. Rather, it is us. We impose it on ourselves because we have bought into the system that materialism, material wealth, is the way you define yourself. And that's how you know you're successful. And in our society, I think you notice that people who have certain skills, like football players who may be making, 100,000, a million, just in one season or two seasons. And we see this on TV, or basketball player, or a smart investor, or maybe a politicians. And we see how quickly these people are moving up in terms of status and power based upon their financial resources. But children begin to make that draw the conclusion that my dad will never be like that. My dad will never be able to have a home. We will never be able to live in a home like that. And then they begin to self-define themselves. And that self-definition becomes a horrible thing, because the perception that I am not worthy because I don't have the bank account to reflect that. And so that gets mirrored down to, because children begin to understand that. And they begin to understand that my father, my mom isn't as wealthy or successful as these people. And obviously we have no way of doing it. And I think that's one of the attraction, I think, to bad behavior. I think that's one of the that's why a lot of our young people get so early involved in quick fix schemes such as selling drugs, and after a while, a youngster who may have dropped out of high school may not have gone through the discipline of actually furthering his or her education, but then they are able to go further than their father. They're able to drive expensive cars, Mercedes, whatever they're able to drive. They're able to do all these things, expensive sneakers and all of that, because they have found ways to buy into this whole notion of material success. And that might be selling drugs. It might be stealing. It might be doing a number of things. And so usually see a lot of these young people are in and out of jail, basically. But after a while, they equate that and say, you know what? The only way you can get this is to gamble. And the gamble might be to sell drugs. And a lot of our young people get caught up in that. And some of our young girls may decide the quickest way to get some money is through prostitution, to use their body to sell themselves, to be able to, if you have a guy who can pay your rent, and give you a car to drive and take care of your rent and so on and so on. So you're not going to be, the young lady wouldn't be arguing, well, he's married, he's not for me. No, he might be married, but the fact that he has the financial resources to provide her an apartment, be able to get her a car to drive that she can drive, and she can do all of these things. So money, people who measure themselves that way find themselves enslaved to other things. And the enslavement might be selling their bodies, engaging in sort of sexual kinds of privileges and behaviors that may not be the standards. And that creates a tremendous problem in terms of, the church and its values and the whole idea of the making of disciples and the shaping of people. There's a dichotomy here. It doesn't go together. There's no congruency between that lifestyle and the lifestyle that Jesus has called us to. And certainly that creates a really deep problem. So I think children know that their parents are not among those in the society that counts. Children know that very early. They know that their parents doesn't matter. And so you have to ask yourself this question. When children come to that conclusion, when they know that their parents know that they're not among those who count, how are these children in terms of their self-esteem, their self-identity, how does that get transformed? How does that get developed? How do they begin to feel about themselves and their aspirations? And of course, some children loathe their parents because they come to that conclusion, and some children go into other ways in order to make things happen. But I think it has an impact. And the point that I'm making here is this headset that my parents are not among those who are successful, or my parents are not people with the financial resource, and therefore they're not important in society. I think that have an impact on their self-esteem and the way they develop and their self-identity. And you know, some of you may not agree with that, but I think it does in the long run certainly have an impact on how these children see themselves, but not only how they see themselves, but some of the choices that they will make in life. And some of those choices are not healthy choices. And we see this in our society. I think you can, I think, unless you have blinders on, but I think if you take a good look in our society and you look in the areas where parents aren't doing so well financially, where children are in this impoverished environment, and you notice what their way of life and the choices that they're making, and you'll see. And of course, I'm not saying that community alone, because I believe that even in the middle class families where parents are doing 2 and 3 jobs and overtime in order to pay the mortgage, in order to do this and to do that, where that happens, there's a downside to that. And the downside is that they are never available emotionally to provide a rich environment, a kind of a camaraderie with their children where they can sit, because they're always too tired, they're always too stressed out. And so they're not really available for their children. And that do in essence, and the explanation is, look, they're doing this to give their children a good education. They're doing this to give their children a better future. But they're forgetting that the shaping of the personality is all just as important. And so they overlook that side of it, and then they get embarrassed later if they work so hard. And then, you know, next thing you know, they have to go and bail out their child from prison, or the child doesn't turn out, or the girls turn out pregnant. All kinds of things happen. And then they wonder, I worked so hard. How can this happen? Well, what children need is not the money. What they don't care about the money. What they need is the attention, the quality, where dad can spend a weekend just fishing with the son, or weekend just sitting with the son and having quality time together, you know, at home. Those things I think are much more important in terms of the internal development of a child, to enrich that child so that he can have the kind of sense of value that I am valuable. Not only am I valuable, but I'm competent. And that competency and that value is what parents reflect. They mirror that to the children. And the children begin through that mirror. They look into their parents' mirror and they begin to see themselves, and they begin to see that they're valuable, that they're important. And that reinforces their sense of who they are. And I think that is all part of this whole process when Jesus gave his commandment and says you ought to go and make disciples. It means the shaping of individual in a holistic way so they can be productive citizens within the Christian community and within the larger community as well. I think that those things are just as important. And so I wanted to thank all of you here who signed in on the Facebook page. It's really great to see all of you here tonight, and it is good. So, but if you have any comments, certainly you can put it on the Facebook page, and Kamal is sitting there. And if you have any comments, those of you who are in St. Vincent, if you're using the WhatsApp page, certainly he will forward that as well. So these are just some of the things that I want us to talk about. And the impact of material accomplishment, I think, and the acquisition, I think is very important. And I mentioned this a little bit last week, because I want to mention it again in terms of the nurturing of the Adamic or the Eve's toxic infection. We are a society that is being nurtured in shame, and we see it all the time, and especially among our children, and the disparity that we see in terms of the haves and the have not, and it is so glaring, in terms of, and you have to, we as a people have to stop and ask ourselves a tough question. Their children tonight who will go to bed hungry. There are children tonight that don't have clean drinking water over the globe somewhere. There are children tonight that don't have adequate health care. There are children tonight who can't afford to go to school because their parents can't afford the uniform or whatever it takes for them to get there, or the textbook, whatever. There are children tonight that don't have internet to do their homework where they live because their parents couldn't afford all of those things. So there are these issues. And I think sometimes we don't pay attention. I think we pay more attention to what's going on in the media, and we look at that, which actor or actress is getting a divorce, or who is dating who, and we feed ourselves with all of that. But we really don't look at what's really happening in our society, and in particular, what's happening to our children. And I think sometimes some of us pay more attention to our cats and our dogs to make sure that they're adequately well kept and well groomed and have all the medical attention and their teeth and to the dentist and make sure all of that is done than we really do, in terms of sometimes for our children. And that's quite unfortunate, because I think our value system is really out of control. Our value system is not where it ought to be. I had a discussion with one of my lady who up just this week, and she was telling me that if there's a car coming down the street and her dog, and the car is about to hit her dog, and there's a baby there too, that her priority would be to save her dog rather than saving the child. And we all kind of giggle a little bit and so on. But we were thinking deeply in our heads how shallow this person is, where the dog, she would feel like her obligation would be to save her dog and allow the car to run over the baby. And there are people out there who have these deeply, deeply embedded views. And maybe you're one of those persons tonight. That maybe that's your view, But is that, to me, that's a twisted way, because the value here, this is upside down. And so you have to understand that the soul is precious. And because the soul is so precious, we have to be vested in every soul, every human being, to ensure that they have an equal opportunity to develop and to grow healthy. And I'm saying that the home is really the place where all of this happens. And we have to basically make that a priority in terms of the home itself. And so, so I think that and I want to talk a little bit about the shame, kind of, because I think much of addiction is really about shame. Much of our, self-mutilation that we see suicides and the escalation of that, the epidemic of opioids and substance abuse and the sedative kinds of heroin and cocaine that people are involved in. All of this is to silence that shame that people feel. And the important thing here is, the solution to that is that 2,000 years ago, the Son of God died on Calvary to fill that gap so that we can be enriched with a new life. He has given us the Holy Spirit, who is now in residency, colonizing, empowering, giving us the enlightenment so that we can be better individual, better humans, so that we can have a better world in which to live And I'm saying that this is the sole purpose of Christianity. This is the sole purpose of Christ coming into our world and taking on the form of human and dying the horrible death that he did. But the good news is that he was raised from the dead. And that is where the secret is. And that's where the remedy is, I think, for all of this. So under such circumstances, I think it is difficult for working class parents either to provide acceptable parenting role models for their children or to enforce their authority, because they're never there. They're too busy trying to keep up with this whole standard that they've set. And that is material asset becomes the priority. That's where true happiness is. If I have enough money, I'll be happy. And so we make that our dream and we make that our priority. But that, I think, that kind of the acceptance and the transmission of that definition, I think it undermines our self-worth. I think the whole idea of attaching material success to self-worth, I think it's a delusion. And I think no matter how much money you have, aren't going to change your internal structure, who you are and what you feel about yourself. You know, there's a case going on right now here in New York, in Manhattan, with this famous singer who is now incarcerated. And, when you hear the stories of some of the appalling thing that this man who's have billions of dollars has engaged in, you wonder what has happened. And I think he's a good example of money can't fix what's broken on the inside. It just doesn't do it. It just makes it worse. It seems like in this particular case, and most of you probably are up to speed on this particular case. And I'm not a follower of him. I didn't know who he was until just recently when his name appeared in the news. Famous singer who has done all this egregious kinds of things, sexual perversion that he has been engaged in, and yet he's got so much money. Yet his soul is broken, is empty. There is a brokenness that the billions that he had couldn't fix and wouldn't fix. In all likelihood, if he loses his case, probably spend the rest of his life in jail. It's quite unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So I think that's a lesson there for us, that money can't fix it. That is why the Son of God came into this world. And he died on Calvary. And it was John who said, he looked yonder and he said, here, you see, there comes the Lamb of God that takes it away the sins of the world. And the sins there is to remove that emptiness, the total restoration, the remodeling. And he said to Nicodemus, he must be born again. And that's really the ultimate solution. And so, the middle class family is struggling. And it's okay. I'm not saying struggling is bad. I'm just saying the priority is what needs shifting. And I think if you shift the priority and get it right, there's nothing wrong with working. You have to work. God told Adam, you need to work. When the sweat of your brow, you should, feed yourself. So work is an honorable thing, but you have to put it in its priority. And once you have the priorities straight, I think everything certainly will go well. So, if you have any questions, please, if you're on the Facebook, if you have any comments that you want to make, please make it so that we could, be able to see any comments that you might have and just share those. And we could, and if you have, for those of you who are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, something you can call and we will respond, or you can send us. So let me talk a little bit about the Christian community, because I think that's important for us to talk a little bit about the optimal, socialization for our children, what that should look like. And, and I just put a little phrase that said the ethos of philia, and there are many Greek words, of course, and people tend to focus more on agape love. And, and I want to tell you, agape love is not the one that causes you to run to the jewelry store to buy an engagement ring. Okay, it's the phileo love. It's that affection that you have, because agape is you love your enemy. You're not going to marry your enemy. Okay, so I know sometimes we emphasize this agape and all of that stuff, but we forget what's holding a family together. It's that phileo, that kingship, that closeness, that affection, and that's what we need to have. I think that holds us, a kingship, sense of kingship, this family love. And I think that's what we ought to see in, and I'm not saying that agape isn't important, because agape is sort of an unconditional kind. You love people in spite of who they are, and that's what God has. But, I'm saying to you, God isn't embracing. When he embraces, it's the phileo affection that we have. And that's where we are with each other. Of course, you may do something kind for your neighbor, but obviously if he's a thief and is a rapist, obviously you're not going to expose him to your daughter. Follow? But you ought to love him still, right? Aren't you? Okay. But love him meaning that you're going to give him an opportunity to change his life. But certainly you're not going to invite him over and leave him sit with your daughter in your home. See, it doesn't work that way. So I think that what really works is this phileo, this sort of kingship, this family bond where we love each other. We want to spend time with each other. We embrace each other. And that's the kind of community, I think, that's so important within the family, and also within the, when I worked in New Jersey, the Camden Church of Christ, there was another congregation there in Philadelphia, and it's called the One Cuppers. But one thing about those people, whenever you go, they'll hug and they'll kiss you, and they took it very seriously. They said, "Let's greet one another with a holy kiss." And when you go there, these were affectionate people. I see this also too in visiting the church in Hawaii. I noticed that people were a lot more embracing of each other and so on. There's a lot more of a warmth and affection, I think, in certain cultures and among certain people. And I think the same thing ought to be within our family system, where to have that affection, that strong fellowship with each other. And I think when children are being socialized in that environment, I think it's healthy for them. And it's also true that when your neighbors and all the other children can come together and share that together, and it still is unsettling for me here in the United States, where you see congregations that are predominantly African American, and then there's another congregation that is predominantly, predominantly Black, and then you have a congregation that's it's all white. And the interesting thing, they all have the same doctrine, same everything, but one is over there, and one is all white, and one is over here, and they all, and they don't see that there's anything wrong with that. Follow? So we tend to still separate out ourselves, and Jesus came to break down that middle wall of partition, so that we all can come with our diverse personalities, our differences, that we come and we can build together as a family. And that's where I think politicians do their work best. They divide us in order to conquer us. Okay. And I think we buy into that. But we see it not just in the secular world, but I see it in the churches itself. And because, like I said, you have the Black church and the white church, and they're right across from each other. Same doctrine. Not that one is Baptist and one is Catholic, or one is, they may all be two Baptist churches, or two churches of Christ, or two churches of God. One is Black and one is white, right across from each other. Same doctrine, same everything, same Bible, no difference in terms of the theology, same theology, except the color of the people is what sets them apart. And to me, that's not about the phileo. That's not about creating an ethos, a community, an environment where people can commune and enjoy and share the grace of God, because the grace of God transforms individual, change the personality, where we can begin to see each other as God's children, not white, black, rich, poor, but we all come together in this kingdom. And here's the interesting thing. God is the one who takes us out of the world and places us into his kingdom. God is the one who takes you out of the world and adds you to the church, to the ecclesia. So the question is, if God is the one who's doing the adding, and he adds all the white people into one group and add all the black people into another group, and they're just in the same community, same village, just across from each other, then you have to say that God is a God of confusion, isn't he? He's confused, really confused, because on one hand, God is preaching one thing, and another, he practices another. I want to tell you that religious division is not an act of God. It's an act of man. We divide ourselves. God's effort is to unite us. His son came, broke the walls of the middle wall of petition, meaning he created a situation where both races, all the culture. And one thing about culture, Christianity creates its own culture. And we forget that. But we want to somehow maintain our cultures, maintain our traditional ways of thinking. And that, I think, has a problem. So what happens to our children who are being socialized in those environments, they themselves become the product of an extension of us, an extension that carries hate and bitterness and racial tendencies against other people, because they're being socialized that way. And I'm saying that the churches themselves are also engaging in that toxic, negative, dangerous behavior by dividing up. And our children are being socialized in those religious groups, and they themselves begin to take on those views. And that's what happened. So we have to understand that this whole ethos of philia, this whole environment of brotherly love and kingship, of love that holds us together, because the Holy Spirit and God's truth, the gospel, holds us together. And that, to me, is a very powerful message. And we, as so-called evangelists and ministers, whatever you choose to title, you call yourself as a leader within God's family, you ought to allow God's truth to be the guiding principle. And that guiding principle will ultimately be uniting people rather than dividing people. So, I believe that spiritual enrichment, our spiritually enriched environment, is a place of daily gratitude and thanksgiving. I believe when you step back and you look at what God has done for you, for each of us, it means our entire life is one of perpetual gratitude and thanks. And I think once our children are being socialized in an environment where mom and dad have internalized this kind of perpetual gratitude and thanksgiving, looking to the higher power, looking to Jehovah and thanking him every day, I believe that eventually that attitude will seep into the character and the personality of those children that are being socialized in those environments. And instead of where you find hate, you find gratitude. Where you find malice and all of that, you find forgiveness. You'll find philia, you find a kind of love within that bonding love that holds people together and glue people together. I really do. And I think it can be done. I think the ethos, an ethos free of negative financial anxiety. I think financial anxiety is crippling. And I think many homes are broken today because of financial anxiety. People are fighting over money. And I think this is also true within the Christian community. You see churches that are poor churches, and you see super wealthy churches. And you kind of wonder, God, it must be really biased. Where God, and here's the interesting thing about all of this. The doctrine is where the super wealthy churches are thanking God for the wealth that they have. And then the churches that are poor are still thanking God for the little that God has given to them. But the bottom line here, you have to ask yourself, if God is the one who's generating all this wealth, why is he generating so much wealth to this group over here, and to this group over here, he gave them so little that they can't even pay for the light bill? It doesn't make sense, does it? So I think we need to, sometimes I think, I think it was Karl Marx who once said, it's that religion is the opium of the people. It becomes a substitute for dysfunction. That there's no reality to it. There's no truth to it, because there's no congruency between what a person is preaching and what they're practicing. There is a cognitive dissonance between what you're preaching and what you're practicing. There's no match up. They don't. If God is the one who's giving the wealth, how come there's such disparity between these super wealthy churches and these other church? Is it because these are the lesser? I think it was one of the African brothers that said we're children of the lesser gods. Okay, and so maybe these children are saying, well, our God is not as powerful as your God, because somehow you're getting all the blessings and we're getting none. We have to begin, and that's where a lot of our young people these days have become so cynical, because when they look at our doctrines and what we're preaching, they see that the behaviors doesn't correspond together. And so they say, look, you know what? I don't want to have anything to do with this. It's just that there's no congruency between what the people are preaching and the way their lifestyle is. And so a lot of people tend to, and I think, part of that is because money becomes a god. And everything is about money. And money, governs the family, the policy of the family, the sacrifices of the family, the energy of the family, the priority of the family. It's all around the dollar. It's all around money. And I think that is devastating for our children. And so, the living space also, I think, should be free of violence and abuse. Unfortunately, a lot of our children are being socialized in an environment of violence, in an environment of abuse. We know this. I mean, those of you who are teachers working in the educational system, work with this every day. You see children who are coming from homes where there's domestic violence, where the children themselves are victims, have been incest and sexual abuse with children. Teachers struggle with this. Principals struggle with this. They see it every day. Doctors see it. Police officers see it every day. Now, it may not be every day, but they work with this. And this is a situation. And I'm saying that we have to begin as a people to understand that if our children are going to be safe and they're going to be healthy, we have to put things in place as a nation, as families, husband and wives within our community, to ensure that our children are not going to be socialized in an environment of violence, where children have to be, there's gunshots all over the place. Children are being killed in their homes from stray bullets in some villages and in some quarters of the world. It is not safe. Well, we know what's going on in Israel, in Palestine, where people are living underground because certain people decide to exterminate them, like if they were rats or cockroaches. And we see this. And we see bigger nations who are supplying the weapons and supplying the financial resources so that these people can be exterminated. We see this every day. We see with taxpayers' money, the bulk of our budget is going towards military hardware to exterminate people as though they were cockroaches and they shouldn't be living on this planet. This is the disparity that we're seeing. And unfortunately, some of the biggest advocates for some of these atrocities are so-called religious organizations, churches that are funding some of these devilish, demonic kinds of belief system where certain people are to be exterminated. and shouldn't be on this planet. And yet we expect our young people to buy into this. And we're wondering why is it that they're not flocking our religious worship and our religious place, temples and churches and synagogues. And why is it? It's because we as adults, our lives are nasty. Nastiness has become a way of life, how we've chose to live our lives, where the rich climbs on the back of the poor in order to get to the top, and they don't look back, they don't care. That's what's happening. And that, my friend, is also being seen. So I think we need a place where individual rights and boundaries are respected. This is where we should see this in our homes. But I'm saying if it moves into the home, then it moves into the neighborhoods and elsewhere, where individual boundaries. And one other thing about substance abuse, it's about the enmeshment, where everybody rotates around the alcohol or rotates around the drug. And the enmeshment. And one of the research back in the early 80s coined the term codependency, where it means that, our lives revolves around the addict, and our personality and our children, are enmeshed in all of that. And that enmeshment cripples the soul, cripples the lives. And so I think that we have to understand, that the severity, when a soul is crippled through this enmeshment, it becomes very difficult. And then we expect educators in the school system to reverse the process. We expect them to do miracles, okay? And their job is simply just to help your kid to learn math and English, not to change their personality and their character. They don't have time for that, because the exams, they got to pass all these tests so they can get along the process. It is the home responsibility to begin to do some of these things. So I think we have to begin to step back and spend some time and look at what's going on. So you can't, if children are raised in an environment where their boundaries, are being violated, where their rights are being violated, then they learn to do that. They become good at it. And some politicians are experts at the violation of the rights of others and the boundaries. They don't care, and that's a problem and we see this in churches too, where the preacher thinks he's God, and somehow everything is his. Everybody got to cow down to him or her or whatever. Well, these days it's not just him, it's her also in some of these institutions. And I'm saying that we have to begin to create an environment where we can respect the rights of others, where we can respect boundaries. This is where I stand. We have to teach our children how to set their boundaries and to know when their boundaries are being violated. And I think that's where child abuse comes in. Because when child abuse is about that, for you to abuse, that means the child has no boundaries. And that's why we have to begin to help our children to set up their boundaries about their identity, who they are, and give them the self-efficacy, the strength to be able to protect those boundaries. And that may simply means to tell your teacher what's happening at home, to tell somebody else, because your boundary, that's important. And we've got to, but you see, denial, and that's why I talk about enmeshment. You see, when in addiction, enmeshment is where the sickness is not just with the person, the addict itself or the alcoholic, but the sickness goes into the entire family because it's all enmeshed and it becomes enabling, basically. And so what happens, the child becomes the victim of abuse. And that abuse may not be just physical abuse, neglect, but it may also be incest, sexual abuse as well, abandonment and neglect. All of those things destroy the fiber of rights, individual rights and boundaries. And so when our children begin to grow up, they have no boundaries and they are not able to protect themselves. And so once that damage is done, it cripples the child. And once it cripples the child, it goes on forever. and it goes into their own family, and it becomes intergenerational, and it begins to multiply itself. And so to create this environment, we have to begin to look at how we are raising our children. What are the goals? And I go back to the phrase, Jesus said, go and make disciples. And that phrase, to me, is a holistic approach. And we have to begin to do exactly that if we're going to be able to do that. So I think I'll stay here for tonight. And certainly we can continue, our lessons further. But I wonder if, Kamal, we have no comments so far, I think.
No, we haven't any. And
Okay.
no calls.
So we will end here at this point, I think. And let me see if there's any. I don't think there's any message. Let me just quick glance at the
Facebook.
if there's any quick glance at the Facebook people here. And just thank you, Yolanda. It's wonderful to have you, Monique, Dominique, Marissa. It's a privilege to see you here tonight. So there are many of you here tonight, and it's certainly great. And we'll be back next Wednesday night. And hopefully the system is going to work, and we'll be able to bring this. So I want to thank all of you, and see you all next week, same time, same place. God bless. And thank you all for being a part of the program tonight. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davis. Pleasure having you always on a Tuesday. You are listening to the Full and Abundant Life radio program hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. This program, like I said, comes your way each and every Tuesday from 9 until 10. God's willing to join them again next Wednesday night right here on WFM for another Full and Abundant Life radio program. Thank you, Doc. We were looking at 1 minute after the 10 o'clock hour here in the Eastern Caribbean.